Hello, Mrs. Lyubi and my fellow classmates. Today I'm giving you a presentation all about ecosystems and food webs, explained by the one and only me. Now, what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is a habitat, like an ocean or a forest, where many organisms live and depend on each other and consume each other and transfer energy from each other, basically a community. Now, what's a food chain? A food chain's a chain of living organisms where energy is transferred from one organism to another via consumption or eating. For example, it all starts with the sun. The sun shines on the plant, then a herbivore eats the plant, then a carnivore eats the herbivore, and it keeps going, and it keeps going on and on and on until it reaches an apex predator. Now, this is a diagram of a food chain, as you can see here. Now, what's a food web? A food web is basically like a huge food chain, but many food chains have clashed together. When two food chains clash together, their predators clash together, and more chains clash together to form a web. And this is a diagram of a food web. Now, what are the roles of each type of organism in the food web? It all starts with producers. Producers are plants because they make their own food through photosynthesis instead of relying on consuming something. Then there's the consumers. And the consumers, they all eat already existing food because they can't make their own food. Apex predators are consumers that don't have any predators. And decomposers are living organisms that break down dead organisms to put nutrients to support the web. They're at the bottom of the food chain because of course they don't have any prey. Now, where do plants get the energy to grow and survive? As we discussed earlier, they're producers because they make their food through photosynthesis. Basically, they use carbon dioxide from the air, water from the soil, and sunlight from the atmosphere too. And animals are consumers, and plants are the exact opposite of consumers, of course. And as you can see, this is a diagram of photosynthesis, basically a plant who is producing its food. Now, how do plants obtain materials from air and water? Now, plants form nearly 95% of the dry parts of their body through air, which is carbon dioxide, and water from the soil. They absorb these simple molecules from the air, or from the atmosphere and from the ground, and transform them into solid plant matter like wood, bark, and leaves. Now, carbon dioxide, we discussed this earlier probably. Plants absorb this gas through microscopic pores on their leaves called stomata. These leaves decide which gases to pass through and which gases to not. Water, whose chemical formula is H2O, provides both the physical fluid a plant needs to stay upright and the pieces of the chemical required to build their food. So water is pulled out of the soil via osmosis, where the water actually moves into the cells and picks up nutrients and gets more nutrients. And as the water travels up tiny straw-like tubes inside the stem called xylem, they evaporate out of the leaves into the air, and it improves the water below it upward, which basically acts like a giant straw. Now, water is made of hydrogen. So inside the leaf, the plant uses solar energy to split apart the water into hydrogen and oxygen. It discards the oxygen, which is not needed, out into the air, and it keeps the hydrogen. The plant combines this hydrogen with carbon dioxide from the air to create glucose, and glucose is a type of sugar, and the plants use it to make energy, as we discussed earlier. Now, how do plants turn water into solid matter? They act like tiny chemical factories by creating glucose, which forms solid structures like the branch roots and leaves. And the remaining glucose, it's turned into starch, and it's stored in the plant's roots for the plant to use later. Now, what are the relationships between organisms and ecosystems? Basically, how they depend on one another. Now, no organism in an ecosystem can survive already all alone, so they rely on each other in three main different ways. Hold on, did I skip a slide? Wait, no, I didn't. Now, how are relationships feeded? We need to know. Producers, which are plants and algae, which they make their own food from sunlight and water by photosynthesis, as we discussed earlier. And now they are the base for the entire ecosystem, which means without them, nobody can relate to anybody. So yeah. Now, consumers. These are animals that can't make their own food, so they rely on other living things. Which herbivores rely on plants, carnivores rely on other animals, and omnivores rely on others, on both. And decomposers break down dead organisms to supplement the relationship process. So basically, all parts of an ecosystem, all are all part of the system of relationship. What even are the type of relationships? Now, they're called symbiosis, and there are three main types. Mutualism, which basically is win-win, and both organisms work together, and both get benefited from each other. For example, bees get food from the flowers via nectar, and the bee collects pollen and accidentally drops it on its way to the next flower, helping more of that flower's species grow. Commensalism, which is win neutral. For example, one organism gets benefited, but the other is neither affected nor harmed. For example, birds nesting in trees. The bird gets a safe home, but the tree is unaffected. Now there's parasitism, win-lose. One organism benefits by harming the other. Example, a tick feeds on a dog. The tick feeds on the dog's blood, giving the tick a feast. But the dog loses blood and can get sick. Now, there's competition and balance. Organisms also interact or compete by relying on another organism's food source. For example, food, water, space, and sunlight. For example, predators like wolves hunt prey like deer. This keeps the prey population from getting too big, and so if there are too many deer, then they'll overgraze the plants, causing the ecosystem to collapse. Now there's plant competition. In forests, tall trees block the sunlight. Short trees must adapt to live here, whereas taller or grow quickly in the spring before the trees get their leaves. Plant power and ecosystems quiz. Yeah, I'm giving this quiz to you guys. What makes plants different from most other living things, giving them the role of producers? What is the primary way of plants taking water from the environment? During the day, what gas do plants mostly take in from the air to help them make food? A caterpillar eats leaves from a bush. What's the caterpillar's role in this ecosystem? organisms plays a role of a decomposer in an ecosystem. Fungi, rabbits, or plants?
Fungi.
Bees visit flowers to drink sweet nectar. While doing so, they spread pollen, which helps the flowers make more seeds. What's the relationship? If a forest ecosystem lost all of its decomposers, what's going to happen? What's the primary role for leaves for a plant? What two main products do plants make during photosynthesis? Now, which of these are not true about food webs and ecosystems? A, decomposers break down dead organisms to provide nutrients for the web. B, producers make their own food from live animals. C, consumers eat plants and animals as energy because they cannot make their own food. D, apex predators are at the top of the food web.
B.
Correct. Oh, never mind. I can't actually flip the screen over in school. Thank you for attending this presentation, everybody.